right, back with another hieroglyph. This one is obviously a seated woman, but how was it used in ancient Egyptian? That's what we'll get into in just a moment. Welcome to Voices of Ancient Egypt. If you're new here, I'd love it if you click subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss future videos like this one. All right, so this is clearly a hieroglyph that shows a seated woman, but how was it used? Well, it's usually used as a determinative, and if you're not familiar with what a determinative is, I recommend you download my free half-hour hieroglyphs guide, which is linked in the description below. So this is used very similarly to the seated man hieroglyph that we talked about a couple of days ago. So in this case, the seated woman hieroglyph will be used whenever you're describing usually a female person. So this could be a category of female people. It could be a particular woman, her name, for example. Or it could also be when you're talking about a collective of people who are both men and women, in which case you'll use both the seated man and the seated woman. An example of this is the word for people, remech. So you also see this in words like the word for woman. So we talked about the word for man, which is spelled with the door bolt S and a little dash and a seated man. So the word for woman is extremely similar. You still have the door bolt S, and then we have a T because that is the feminine ending, like I've talked about before in my video about the T hieroglyph. And then you have the seated woman as a determinative. So in modern times, in the West at least, we pronounce this as set. And interestingly enough, very similar to the woman word, what I mean is the word for woman in Arabic today, or lady, which is set. So still extremely similar root being used in Egypt today. All right. So that is the seated woman hieroglyph in that usage. You can also use it, as I mentioned when I talked about the seated man, it can also be used for a suffix pronoun. So if a woman is talking about herself, like if I were saying my son, for example, I would use the seated woman suffix pronoun hieroglyph. And this is transliterated exactly the same as if you were using the seated man and a man was speaking about himself. It's simply graphically in the language because you can have a seated man or a seated woman. If a woman is talking about herself, you will use that seated woman one. All right, so that's it for the seated woman. I will be back again with another hieroglyph soon.